It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil, Amok to you. Welcome to my Takeout, my micro talk show on the AAPIs and the AAXs, the Asian American X. Fill in your own ethnicity there. But it's for everyone else. I mean, I'm not exclusive in that way. All just like, remember those ads for Levy's rye bread? Now I'm dating myself. You don't have to be Jewish. I know that just comes up whenever I think about, this is for everyone, right? But we're here. It's Halloween. And it's cold out there. I'm all bundled up. I got my Philippine. This is not an ascot. Someone asked me, "Oh, is that an ascot?" Well, this is what they call a Filipino tubao. Filipinos bow a lot. No, a tubao. It's a big long piece of cloth that you can make into a sari, a kilt. You can make it into like a wrap, a shoulder wrap, a neck wrap, a noose, an ascot, whatever. It's cold. It's cold. And that's the big news today. If you are awaiting trick-or-treating, Axios reports that Halloween trick-or-treaters across the country are facing some of the coldest air so far this season. So trick-or-treaters are they're already expected to see a downgrade in candy quality. Can you imagine that? But that's because, everyone's buying those little cheap minis and, they get minier every year, in terms of the ingredients. So now you're going to get the minis. You're not going to get the good kind of candy. Heaven forbid someone gives you a homemade thing. Are you going to accept a homemade thing? If someone gives you an apple, are you going to take an apple? It's getting to be that the modern day way to do Halloween has to be digital. It has to be on your phone. There's got to be a Halloween app. I mean, that's just the way it is. Because we are too fragile for a brick and mortar Halloween. And that's sad. But I think it's true because, we're probably just going to turn off the lights here where I am and just say, hey, our kids are gone. No Halloween. Save your teeth. Save on your dental bills. I don't mean to be a Halloween Scrooge because it's not the kids who are into Halloween and want the cheap candy now. It's the adults who want to get dressed up and party. And, a friend of mine sent me a picture of his kids. They're adults. I mean, 24, 25-year-old kids doing Halloween, I guess. And the father still thinks it's cute. Oh, look. Hey, look. The boy is dressed up like a little doggy. And look, the girl, she's just an excuse to party, I guess. So Axios is reporting, hey, it's going to be cold out there. You're already going to get bad candy. And I'm telling you, because there's going to be snow squalls in Minneapolis, Chicago, Milwaukee. It's going to be cold. 40 million people under freeze warnings. So instead of candy, people should be passing out, I guess, pudding pops or something. I mean, it's going to be cold all throughout and Halloween night. And normally it gets pretty cold, Ryan. But now I said if I go out, and I'm still threatening to do so, I will go out as Larry Itliong. Larry Itliong, the labor leader. And Larry Itliong was known as Seven Finger Larry because when it was cold outside, he did not hang out in the Central Valley of California. He didn't go from field to field. He went right up the coast from California to Seattle to Alaska. And this is a bit of Filipino-American history, sort of like one last hurrah for Filipino-American History Month. This is the 31st. October, Filipino-American History Month. They would go from Seattle to Alaska and become They were called the Alascaros. And there in Alaska, they worked the canneries, they worked the salmon, and that's where Larry went, and he had an accident. And he was known as Seven Finger Larry. And one can only surmise that the fingers that he lost were the ones that didn't get in the way of his ability to sort of claw like a lobster at young kids, because young kids would say, "Oh, there's Uncle Larry, Tito Larry, there's a lobster," and so that was Larry Itliong, Seven Finger Larry, right? We remember Seven Finger Larry. His birthday was October 25th, and so on the last day, I mean, it's cold. If you're in Michigan or somewhere in the cold front, it's too cold, Minneapolis, you can just pretend you're an Alascaro and be Larry Itliong in Alaska. But I'm going to be here in California, and I'm going to be doing my Larry Itliong speech, my Larry Itliong monologue, which I do in my show, Emil, Amok, the monologues. One of the monologues. You're lucky if I do it on one of the shows that you see them. But Larry Itliong, as you know, was the man who started the 65 Delano grape strike. He started it. I mean, he was already in his 60s, and Filipino Americans had already been in the field since the 20s. So imagine, by the time the Delano grape strike is coming along, these guys are all senior citizens and maybe ready for retirement. But they were AFL-CIO, the Agriculture Workers Organizing Committee, and it was a union in Delano, in the middle of the state, in the Central Valley. They voted to strike on September 8th, 1965. And Larry Itliong, the leader, he went out there. I knew it was going to be tough, but they walked off. They were asking for $1.45 an hour. That's all. $1.45. That's all it took. $1.40, excuse me. That would have been a decent wage in 1965. So Larry's out on strike. Where was Cesar Chavez? Nowhere. Nowhere to be found. I mean, he was in his office with the National Farm Workers Association, which was kind of like a social club, practically like a book club or something if they read. I don't know. National Farm Workers Association, kind of like just a gathering. It was not a union. But Larry saw this, and he saw the migration of Mexican workers, and he said, you know, we got a small number of Filipinos because we're all in our 50s and 60s. There's a kind of war of attrition that's gone on for decades. And Larry said, if we're going to win this, we need the Mexican Americans to join forces with us. So he went to Chavez, and within the week, by September 15th, the Chavez group voted after listening to Larry Itliong and understanding that their future and the future of the Filipinos in the fields really depended on coming together. Unity. So often just elusive, but unity was the key. So the strike began September 8th. By September 15th, Chavez joined the Filipinos with his Mexican-American workers, or Mexican workers in America, and the United Farm Workers came to be. That was the merging of civil rights and labor rights in the United States, and it started with Larry Itliong because he was a bad MF. He was tough, but he was strategic, and he knew what it took to win a strike. The UFW. There in 65, he left in 71. He died in 76 of ALS. We honor him. His birthday would have been on the 25th. And as Filipino American History Month ends today on the 31st. You know, I'm just going around. Anyone who wants to hear, I'm going to give my little Larry Itliong monologue about why I admire Itliong. But you need to know that Itliong, it's been acknowledged by the Chavez family, by the founders. The co-founder of Chavez's NFWA, Gilbert Padilla, says, yeah, it was Itliong. He was the one. Chavez family, back in 2015, Paul Chavez, he set the record straight. He said, yeah, it was Uncle Larry. He used to call Itliong Uncle Larry because they knew each other in Delano, but the strike was separate. It was the Filipinos on strike. Chavez had to be convinced. And it was Paul Chavez who told me, he said, of course there were some hard feelings. Who would not be offended if they felt their contributions weren't recognized? We should now look to recognize these unsung heroes. And he was talking about Larry Itliong. So I remember Larry Itliong today because you can ask people. I mean, I could talk about Larry Itliong like I have for the last, since 2010, since 2006. I mean, I've been talking about Larry Itliong for a long time. That's 17 years. And look, in terms of the schools and, you know, public places and public things named for Chavez versus Itliong, Itliong doesn't even come close. People still see Chavez as the man. When the guy was first, the guy who started it, that's the guy who should be honored. So on Halloween, I thought, okay, I'm going to put on my glasses. I don't have black horn rim. This is going to have to do. I thought maybe I have black horn rim glasses. And I wasn't going to cut my hair for Larry. Sorry, Larry. I can only go so far on this, the verisimilitude of Halloween costumes. And as far as cigars, I thought he'd have a bubblegum cigar, but I have this big Crayola marker. He was Seven Finger Larry. Remember that. So I'm in my Larry Itliong semi-drag, or my semi-Larry Itliong drag, performing my Larry Itliong mini-monologue, which comes from a speech that Larry gave from a lecture at UC Santa Cruz in 1976. He was telling the students there that, hey, get used to telling people no. They want you to come off the picket line, you say no. They say, come on, work, you say no. He knew he didn't have to go along with the powerful, what the powerful people were saying. He knew that he had power himself. And if he was offered money, Larry Itliong says, hey, money? What's money? He did not hesitate to turn it down. A lot of people want to buy me off. One of the biggest organizations that I grew up in this country offered me $200,000. They said, Larry Itliong, we know you need money. We know you need money. You're doing a good job in California, but we know you need money. We'll give you $200,000 to do whatever you want to do. But then Itliong described the conditions. The money would be his if you're going to help Cesar Chavez run this service center. Just the implication that I'm supporting Cesar Chavez. They want to give me $200,000. And this was after Itliong left the United Farm Workers Union early as a VP to Chavez. It was as if the union acknowledged that Chavez needed Itliong to unify the two biggest groups in the fields, the Mexicans and the Filipinos, and to keep them together. You know what I tell them? I don't need that $200,000. I can eat rice, pusit, bagong, mango. I don't need $200,000. He told the young Pinoys with him. All that pusit, that squid, bagong, anchovy paste. He said he told that to the young Pinoys in the classroom, and they were amazed that he had the guts to refuse 200,000. I tell them 200,000 to sell out my countrymen. I figure we have 350,000 Filipinos in California. They're offering 200,000. That's not even $1 a head. No, I don't want your money. If I want to sell my countrymen, then give me 50 million. 50 million, I'll take it. 50 million. So Itliong named his price, but as he told his story, he laughed with the students in the seminar. You want to buy my countrymen? Give me 50 million. 50 million. Oh, my goodness, my goodness. And that's Uncle Larry. Tito Larry. I call him Manong Larry. We bring Manong Larry back from the dead to help get him the respect and adulation that eluded him all his life. This is the way I'm capping off Filipino American History Month with my Larry Itliong monologue. Manong Larry. He came to America right around the time, actually about 10 years earlier than my father. And what a tough Filipino. A model for Filipinos today. That's why. Which is one of the reasons why October is Filipino American History Month. Larry Itliong should have the last word on the month. So, the other big news is the UAW. UAW big winners, right? And let's review what the union won, because it's not insignificant what the union won. Got to go to my handy dandy. This is according again to Axios. I like Axios. It's a nice little review, but they got this tentative deal with with GM that likely puts an end to 6 weeks of strikes that shut down large swaths of the auto industry. The proposal with GM, similar to the deals with Ford and Stellantis, provides big gains in wages and benefits, plus increased job security. According to reports, the exact terms aren't known, but the UAW won from all three automakers 25% wage increases over the 4.5-year contract, an immediate 11% raise upon ratification, and a restoration of cost of living adjustments that would bring pay increases to about 30% by 2028. Ford's deal also includes a $5,000 ratification bonus. So, some big wins. Some people said, come on, we were looking for 40%. We were looking for more. They got a lot here. They wanted 40% raises and a 32-hour work week for 40 hours pay. But they did all right for the strike. 25% wage increases over the 4.5 years. It took them this long to get there, it would have taken them a little longer, a little more pain to get where they wanted to go. But it's a compromise to see how much pain you're willing to go through. And this seemed fair. So everyone's ballyhooing the UAW. almost in the same way that they were talking about the grape strike and Cesar Chavez and Larry Itliong. So there's a real kind of excitement over unions. Again, it's about time. I mean, it got me excited. I was once a member of the National Writers Union, which is AFL-CIO and part of the UAW. I was so moved that I rejoined. I mean, for the longest time I wasn't in position to be a member. Well, the union was sort of a little squirrely in terms of its benefits. And everyone is out there. I mean, they don't negotiate for me, but I've been a good union employee at all the broadcast outlets I worked for, all the media, the press, the newspapers guild. So in honor of Larry Itliong and the UAW, I re-upped at the National Writers Union. I mean, someone told me yesterday they were just looking at the amount of words that I've written in my lifetime, and they said, "Oh, you count the Asian Week writing and the ethnic press and the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund." They said, I hope, Emil, they paid you a pretty penny for your words. You've written over 1 million words. Well, I did okay. But I want everyone to do well. That's the thing about the union. There's no limit to a ceiling, but there is a floor that everyone stands on. That's what having a union is all about. So now we turn our attention to the war. A lot of war talk. I'm careful to talk too much about the war talk because, it changes. Right now, New York Times is reporting that Israel's hitting dense Gaza area, killing many, says it was targeting Hamas. That's always going to be the excuse from Israel. It's not an excuse, it's their justification. The medical director of a nearby hospital reported hundreds of injured people and dozens of deaths. Now, if you've listened to me on my show, I contact my friend in Israel. He's a Filipino American. He's a lawyer, a retired lawyer, and he just gives me a sense of what's going on the ground. I mean, I'm not a member of a big news organization where I could travel there with my flak jacket and put on my armored helmet and cover the war. I'd like to. I mean, if you've covered a story abroad, and I have, all right, once, that was enough. I was in the Philippines back in the 80s. But you know the trouble. You know how hard it is to get a story, especially when it's not when you don't speak the language. They speak English, but it doesn't make it easy just because they speak English, because they speak all these other dialects that make it hard to get at the truth. But the thing about my experience in the Philippines, it was just as hard as any other foreign assignment, except no bullets, no bombs. And that stuff is real. We'll talk about that a little later because there was an interesting report about covering war, what that's like. I'll say I've never covered a war. I've covered street violence and riots in the streets. I've covered prison riots. But war, I missed out on the Iraq wars, being embedded, because I wasn't with a major news organization then. But actually, I don't know. If given the opportunity, I would have gone. But this is the thing about journalism. You feel called. I would have been more like Ernie Pyle, telling stories of regular people, as opposed to the hits, runs, and errors. But when you're among bombs and bullets, it's hard. when you're in the front lines, that's a different kind of reporting. So, my friend is saying that even though there are some reports that Lebanon and Hezbollah are doing some things to let Israel know that there's a presence in the north, my friend who's up north says he's safe. He's happy to see the ground war because he's hoping that it will do what he really believes needs to be done, which is that Israel needs to retaliate and put Hamas out of business. I mean, but not just put it out of business, but eliminate Hamas. Now, I know that this is contentious because we see what's happening and we see the aerial explosions, we see the humanitarian conditions worsen. The question is, what do we do? There was Blinken and General Austin in front of the Senate committee today, talking about Israeli aid to the Israelis, the need for it, and they were disrupted by protesters who stood up, called for a ceasefire. I think if you are a pacifist like myself, I think we're getting that stage where retaliation has always been justified on the part of Israel. But the point is how much? And the point is, how far does Israel go before it starts violating conventions of war? I mean, they have unilaterally declared that Hamas must be eliminated. My friend, the lawyer in Israel, wrote to me saying he believes that the IDF are, now that they're in Gaza, he thinks that they're there for a while. He says Israelis are still conflicted over the hostages. He says, I think a lot of people are publicly saying they want hostages freed, but quietly understand that the larger war effort must take precedence, notwithstanding the expected cost in hostage lives. So there's hostage lives they're balancing, but now what about Palestinian lives? And now we see it in the ground attacks today. There are more people being killed in Gaza. And my friend writes, the IDF is going to keep increasing pressure on Hamas. There'll be no ceasefire. Netanyahu said it yesterday. Here's an idea Israel should offer that the Hamas leadership can live if they release all the hostages. But Hamas must die militarily. That is as moderate as I've seen my good friend in Israel during the last few weeks as this battle has waged on. He says, have you wondered how the left has demonized Israel for the siege or blockade of Gaza while knowing that Hamas has somehow managed to build hundreds of miles of tunnels and has amassed thousands of rockets? I guess it was a pretty porous blockade. A little bit of sarcasm or irony from my friend's part, but it shows that there was a porous blockade. Actually, Israel says, hey, look, we weren't occupying Gaza because they pulled their soldiers or their troops, but a lot of people still feel that the blockade was on. So that's kind of disputed among people who talk about this. My friend writes, I have seen with dismay at what is happening on the college campuses, nauseating because these kids just haven't looked into the facts, equating Hamas to Israel. He questions. Well, definitely Hamas is not Israel, and Hamas is not Palestine, although Hamas is the governing unit of Palestine. But I don't know if you could say that Hamas represents all the Palestinians. There are some Palestinians who want peace. There's just a fraction. Well, Hamas hasn't had a free election in years. So, but polls have been taken, I've cited them, saying that there's more than a majority who don't go along with the strategy that Hamas has laid out. And this was from a poll taken in the summer this year. One insightful comment I heard tonight: Hamas is the only terrorist organization that is inviting another country, Israel, to kill its citizens. Well, when you hear Hamas talk about how that one Hamas leader on tape saying, Jews love life, we Muslims, we will gladly die and be a martyr for our land, he said. As if, yeah, they welcome death. I mean, suicide bombers are nothing new. But I think a lot of people don't want to go to that extreme. So we're going to have to see how, what happens now. I mean, we're into the ground war. Now the fight here in the United States is over how much money to give to Israel. And, my friend said, look at the facts. I think sometimes if you just look at the facts, you see that it's not as clear cut as we'd like to think. Israel does what it does because it's connected to the U.S. And if the U.S. wanted to stop whatever's going on over there, the U.S. could tell Israel, go a little slow. They tried. They said, go a little slow in the ground war. It didn't happen. So while all that's going on in the Middle East, what's interesting is the debate that goes on here in America. My friend referenced what's going on in campuses. People expressing themselves about Palestinian freedom and looking at the history of Palestinians and Israeli expansionism. Does that make Israelis colonizers of sorts? I don't know. But this is what makes this whole issue very difficult to talk about, especially when you're trying to figure out, well, what's the best and fastest way to peace? What's the best and fastest way to get to a ceasefire? Because one of the things that was mentioned, that was yelled at the protest today, was ceasefire now. I think as more deaths occur, I think you'll hear more calls for ceasefire. Some people who were at once supportive of Israel's retaliation, but don't see the value of extending the violence, extending the military action. Because what is the message? And who will rebuild? And where will these people go? I mean, from a humanitarian perspective, Israel may have gone too far already. So who has the power to say, yeah, ceasefire sounds like the only reasonable idea so that people talk? Well, if you listen to Professor Noam Chomsky and his reading of history, then you know that it's Israel and the U.S. together. and Israel will do whatever the U.S. says. So those protesters you saw today, if you watched them on television, they were right where they needed to be. Not in front of Netanyahu's face, not in the Middle East, but in Washington, D.C., where they could say, ceasefire now. At this point, that may be the only way to get to peace. Although, look, there's something like 230 hostages, and that's going to have to, that's part of the equation. So I don't know where we go, but the protesters there are doing the right thing, exercising their free speech, recognizing that the United States is the place to be. It is the place to go in order to make some kind of difference. Speak truth to power. Ceasefire now. Now, the other issues, whether, and when they say free Palestine, okay, I understand, but you look and see how Israel was set up as a response to how they were neglected because of the Holocaust, and a lot of those people from Eastern Europe, they've come down. Are they on, they are, yes, they are native, but not native to the land. So we can get into some interesting debates over that, but we do need people talking about it so that maybe we can get to an answer, because one thing that won't get us to an answer is the violent actions here in the United States, of which, unfortunately, there are a number. We had Christopher Wray, he's FBI, says the Israel-Hamas war raises potential for attack in U.S. So Christopher Wray warned that several foreign terrorist organizations have called for attacks against Americans since the October 7th assault on Israel by Hamas. So, and now that's terror groups against Americans, but we also are seeing anti-Semitic actions being carried out, which should not be the case. I mean, you could debate policy, but you should not make it a matter of hate. That's a matter of First Amendment. So we're starting to see how things can easily unravel, not just over there, but here in the United States. And I don't think it helps that we have a new Speaker of the House who is so MAGA that he can't even denounce the election deniers. That's a bad sign. And now we're going to have debates on the Hill about aiding Israel, which maybe, can you have the aid and a ceasefire? I don't know. But these are the complex issues that are weighing down on us, and I don't know how we get out of this, except that we get some distance, allow for some free speech. I mean, I was talking to some people from the Michigan area near Dearborn, and big Arab population, the largest in the nation. They're concerned, right? Because of not just there's anti-Semitic things going on, but there's also anti-Arab and anti-Muslim things going on. So everyone's on edge. We don't need that. We need people coming together. We need that sense of unity. I think that's the only way out. mutual respect and understanding, ceasefire, that would begin things. And certainly the protesters speaking out before that congressional hearing today, that's right where they needed to be. People need to hear those voices. They're important voices. I mean, if we're going to have a debate here in this land of democracy, let's hear it all. Truth is complicated, especially in this matter. So we have all the world going on, burning up around us. And, you know, tonight, many of you will be going out for Halloween. This is our distraction. This is our way to get out of, maybe to have a little fun. I take refuge in sports. You know, it's a great distraction, takes my mind off all these things. And one thing I've noticed is how many African-American Filipinos cop to their Filipino-ness now. I mean, it's like they're proud of it. I mean, that wasn't always the case. But you have Josh Jacobs of the Raiders last night. He was playing, the Raiders lost. But, I mean, suddenly Josh Jacobs is all Filipino. I mean, he's proud of being Filipino. What is it? Jason Clarkson with the Utah Stars? His Filipino-ness is, I mean, there's all these proud Filipinos. I welcome it, actually, because, and the half Filipino thing is a great thing, because I think before this generation, there just wasn't that sense that, people don't know Filipino. They don't know. But I always thought that the great thing about diversity in our numbers is that we will find a day when we are unified and we are one, and that's when we have a love interest in each other. So when I see these stories about Josh Jacobs and Jordan Clarkson, is that his name? God, I don't want to get his name wrong. Utah Stars. All these half Filipino guys. And then, of course, you have Olivia Rodrigo, half Filipina. That's, I mean, to me, that's the start. Of course, I'm the only one talking about it like it matters. Although I want to acknowledge to Josh Jacobs of the Raiders and all those other half Filipino stars in professional athletics. Hey, you standing out, holding your hand up, being proud of your heritage, it's important. Doug Baldwin, formerly with the Seattle Seahawks, it's important because people look and see no mention of Filipino anywhere. And if you're a Filipino American, you say, well, I don't know what I am. No. You're there. You're here. There's markers. You're present. Okay, that's it for our show today. I'll talk about school boards and guns tomorrow. I'm just noticing just how in the news you don't get a lot of coverage now about Maine. It just has gone away, and which is too bad because the follow-up, how this guy got his gun, and if something is going to happen to change things, I mean, we need to follow up and see what's going on there. I don't know if that's going to happen. Let's hope. But you got 18 people dead. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, you think of the numbers. you know, it's almost like an earthquake. You know, you only pay attention to when I only pay attention when there's more than 20. That was 18. Sorry. See, that's ridiculous. It shouldn't be that way in America, but it is. All right. I was going to look at one more thing. I'll talk about that tomorrow. Just reading someone's description about covering war and talking about the smell of death, how it's on your clothes and you just can't get it out. And I looked at one reporter today on CNN, and he had a little insignia. See that little insignia there? And there's a company that has it's the Cool Company, KUHL. And so I saw that insignia on the guy's T-shirt. I said, "Oh, these guys, we're cool people." Okay, all right. So if you see me tonight, say, "Hey, Emil," or say, "Hey, Larry, are you going to take the $200,000?" And I'll say, "No, I don't take the 200,000. 50 million. 50 million." All right. Have a happy Halloween. Hey, this is Emil, Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. We're here Monday through Friday, sometimes on repeat, sometimes we're live. This is our secret podcast. I'm live here now. One of our regular listeners waved at the beginning. You can catch us live here on YouTube at Emil Amok 1, on Twitter at Emil Amok, on Facebook at fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media. Also on amok.com, you get some of the replays. You can, wherever you're watching, I think you could put your finger on the screen or manipulate the screen and then just scroll back and get the part of the show where I do my Larry Itliong monologue and listen to that. It's going to be cold outside. So not only are you going to get the smaller candy, but you're going to get freezing air. Bundle up, stay warm. Remember, Monong Larry would not be out in the fields. He'd probably be in Alaska at the canneries. But be safe tonight and have a good time. Be nicely distracted by All Hallows Eve. We like to close every show with a little meditation, a little metta, METTA. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Until next time. Mahal Kita. Oh, look that up. Yeah, look that up. Yeah, look that up. Yeah. Mahal Kita. Mahal Kita. Oh my God. On Halloween, when you're bobbing for apples.